That this consignment has cost them quite a lot of money, and although they are a large organisation, they don't appear to be a big one. They run clubs and so on the way the IRA does, but they've never given the impression of having the same resources behind them. The killing of John McMichael, followed by this, is a very serious double blow.
David McKittrick, thank you very much indeed for joining us. And turning now to some of tomorrow morning's front pages, the first editions anyway. The Daily Express leads on Maggie Mayhem, which is the account of the events in Kano in Nigeria at the end of Mrs. Thatcher's tour of that country. Then the Times leads with the appeal by the fire chiefs of Britain to bring in new legislation to control hazardous materials. Thatcher press chief jostled by Nigerians, also the Times. The Guardian, on an inside page, talks of Mr. Newton, the health minister, giving a pledge that nurses will not get less money for doing the same work. The Financial Times scuffles mar the end of Thatcher's African spectacular. That's all from Newsnight for tonight, but join us again if you can on Monday at 10:45. Till then, from all of us on the programme, have a very good weekend and good night.
On to casting a canny weather eye over the elements, here's John Kettley.
Yes, good evening to you. It looks like we're in for a fairly windy period over the next couple of days. The strongest winds are likely up in the far north of Britain, some storm force winds during Saturday. Let's wallow in the good news though as far as today's concerned, because the temperatures have been quite reasonable in western parts of Britain anyway. Some parts of the southwest reach 13 degrees, but on our league table here we just about managed 11. That's not too bad at all for the early part of January. But can you see, standing out like a sore thumb, 4 places over on the eastern side of England and Scotland, incidentally, just 5 or 6 degrees. Quite a big difference there across the country, because the warm front that was bringing the warmer air from the west really was dragging its feet across Britain. Now, the wind is the main talking point now. It's already beginning to strengthen, especially up here in the northwest, and as the day goes along, as Saturday goes along, you're going to find those winds strengthening all the time with that area of low pressure passing fairly close to the Hebrides there. And some very stormy winds indeed during Saturday. Wind speeds averaging about 60 miles an hour at times up there, so you can imagine the gusts could be well on approaching 100 miles an hour. Further south, I don't want you to get the impression it's going to be a calm day. It's not. It's going to be a pretty windy day with some very strong gusts as well. Well, as far as the rainfall is concerned, it's raining in many parts of Britain just now. If it isn't raining, you're very lucky. A lot of cloud across the country, and the more persistent rain coming across Ireland into western parts of Scotland will cross the rest of Scotland and many of the northern and western parts of Britain as the night goes along, with somewhat drier weather eventually getting in here to Northern Ireland. Quite a bit of mist and fog around the coast incidentally tonight as well. Temperatures continuing to rise. They're about the limit of things now because it's been pretty chilly on the eastern side as you've seen. Well, they're rising steadily now, 7 or 8 degrees probably about the minimum over on that eastern side, and a very mild 10 or 11 down here in the southwest. Well, tomorrow morning a fairly grey start in many parts of Britain, perhaps a little bit of dry weather for a short time on the southeastern corner of the country, and some bright weather already getting into Northern Ireland too. Now, as the day goes along, as the morning goes along, you're going to find that brighter weather crossing into northern parts of England and much of Scotland too. A few showers coming along behind, but still fairly wet over the rest of England and Wales here. 1 or 2 heavier bursts still mixed in. And as the afternoon rolls on, probably some brighter weather getting into the Midlands as well. That's just going to leave East Anglia and the southeast and probably the Channel Islands fairly grey and overcast with further rain from time to time. Now, at the same time, the showers coming into the northwestern part of the country will get a little bit heavier. There could well be some hail and thunder by the end of the afternoon. Of course, driven on by those very strong winds, they're not going to be very pleasant things at all. Now, temperatures tomorrow, as you can see, definitely on the mild side, but whether the wind will make it feel mild is another matter. But something like 9 to 11 degrees generally across the country. These temperatures probably at the highest, though, during the morning, with the colder, fresher weather coming in as the day goes on. Now, if we look on the Atlantic chart, you can see that we're in a warm sector at the moment, this run of southwesterly winds, strengthening all the time, and it's this chap here that's going to be the major factor in developing these strong winds. That'll eventually get away to the western side of Norway by the middle of Sunday. And this system here, fairly close to the southeastern part of England, it'll still give some rain in the southeast on Sunday. Most places, though, in this run of showery southwest or westerly winds, and probably those showers turning to snow up in Scotland during the weekend. Well, that's it from me then. I wish you a very good night.
Well, if you've just switched on for our late film genre noir's The Vanishing Corporal, it will now be shown on Tuesday, the 29th of January, here on 2. And this is because we now present, as a special tribute to the actor Trevor Howard, who died yesterday, his classic film, Brief Encounter. And here's Ian Johnstone, film critic at the Sunday Times, to introduce it.
Trevor Howard carried a portmanteau of values through his films that you could almost rely on. He might appear stubborn, dogged, misguided, outwardly cruel, but you always knew that inside there was an uprightness and decency and honesty that was frequently too painful to bear. I suppose the mould was set in tonight's film, Brief Encounter. It started as a one-act play by Noel Coward and could, in hands other than those of David Lean, the director, and Celia Johnson and Howard, have seemed sentimental and slightly absurd. But here, 33 years ago, was as incisive a summation of the emotional contradictions of being English and in love as we've ever witnessed. Howard mastered the technique of conveying the turbulence within in a most stoical and tight-lipped fashion, but one which brilliantly communicated to the audience the voice of his heart. Nobody did it better. One only has to think of the moment in The Gift Horse when he's seemingly cheerfully hosting a Christmas party on his ship, although he's just had a telegram saying that his son has been killed. Or in Sons and Lovers, when he comes up with the body of his son from the pit and gives his wife a look that it would take a chapter of dialogue to interpret. He'd been a soldier himself in the war, and inevitably, in his career, he returned to uniform innumerable times. When he was in command, you knew who was in command.
Williams has been drinking seawater, sir. I was giving him some fresh water. I'm afraid he'll die without it.
You'll give no one water without my permission. Take that ladle below.
Yes, sir.
You bloody bastard! You'll not put your foot on me again.
Howard and Brando didn't get on terribly well in that film. In fact, Howard summed up his co-star with the words, "Bugger him and his mumbling." He could never be accused of taking his career too seriously. He recalled once how he went with his friend Bernard Lee to see The Third Man, and they both came out in tears, thinking how terrible it was. But Howard's performance as the military police colonel, Calloway, was seen to be the most completely realized portrait in the film. One critic put his finger on his art when he noted, "It's built up, detail by detail, nothing superfluous, nothing exaggerated, until a whole man is put before us." Graham Greene loved the performance, and when he saw Howard as Scobie, in the heart of the matter, the police chief caught between a loveless marriage and the love of a native girl who sees suicide as his only noble solution, Greene confessed that Trevor Howard was the man he'd been writing about in all his works, the near gent combined with the man of action. Modern cinema doesn't deal in parts like Scobie and Calloway nowadays. As Howard said, "I'm offered more old rubbish than the dustman and expected to make something of it." But he leapt into buffoonery with wicked relish.
Speaking, when I've eaten something, I don't want to see it again.
Do you care to be fourth man, Sir Henry?
My dear lady, I wouldn't care to have been even the first.
He used to enjoy himself on location. There are traditional stories of him ending up in jail for trying to conduct an orchestra in Vienna, or ordering champagne for an entire nightclub in Paris when he hadn't a penny or a franc in his pocket. These legends grow in the telling, but there was no doubt he liked to drink. Someone once asked him why, and he replied, "It makes the world a nicer place." Well, he's left the world a richer place, thanks to a body of performances that may have taught us more about ourselves than we would want to know. Never more so than in Brief Encounter.